You wanted to speak out today. You really wanted to talk to this recruiter. I know that. You had a lot to say. And this particular day, you wanted to be public and talk about some of what happened to your son and as a way of preventing it and making information available. So let's start with the bamboozle. Let's start with your son and how they sucked him in and what that meant and looked like.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, of course, when I went to Crawford, Texas in August of '05, I wanted to confront George Bush and ask him what noble cause, because he said that our soldiers had died for a noble cause. And I want to make ending our nation's dependency on the military-industrial complex, or I should say the military-industrial congressional complex, a noble cause that my son died for. And if we have to do that by student by student by student, convincing them not to join the military, then I think that that is a noble cause and a noble way to honor Casey's death. But Casey was 21 when he was recruited out of college. He was going to Solano Community College. He had already completed 3 years. He had earned an AA degree in theater arts. He wanted to transfer to a 4-year college and complete his degree. And he was approached by a recruiter, and we lived in Vacaville, which is just right next door to Travis Air Force Base. So since Casey was 16, he'd been trying to be recruited by Air Force recruiters. And his, of course, they all take the ASVAB test when they're 16. That's the military aptitude test. And Casey scored very well on it, so he was just really, really recruited hard. And he resisted it. That wasn't the way he wanted to go. He did not want to join the military. So he was at a point in his life where he was working full-time and going to school full-time. And to go on to university, we all know how expensive and prohibitive that can be for working class people. And Casey was enticed as a 21-year-old with things that seemed incredibly generous, like a $20,000 bonus. Can you imagine when you're 20 years old? And this was in 2000, so $20,000 still, you know, was a significant amount of money. And he was enticed with the job that he wanted to do. Casey wanted to be a chaplain's assistant in the Army, and this was an Army recruiter, which was even stranger to us because of the proximity to the Air Force Base. His recruiter told him he could be a chaplain's assistant because Casey was a very, very faithful Catholic, and he wanted to be a deacon in the Catholic Church. He wanted to get married. He didn't want to be a priest because he wanted to get married and have a family. So he thought being a chaplain's assistant would be good training to be a deacon in the church. They told him that he could finish college while he was in the Army. They told him that no matter where he was stationed throughout the world, they would give him a laptop and he could take classes. And so he gets to boot camp, and they tell him, oh, you can't be a chaplain's assistant. That MOS, that's the military specialty, is filled. You have a choice between being a Humvee mechanic or a cook. And so Casey chose to be a Humvee mechanic. And when he graduated from boot camp, he didn't get $20,000. He got like $4,200. And they would never, when he got stationed at Fort Hood, every semester, he would ask permission to take some classes, and they would always deny him permission. And one thing he told his recruiter, you know, my mom's going to be upset because, you know, she will be very worried about me if I join the Army. And his recruiter said, Sheehan, you tell your mother not to worry, because even if there is a war, you won't see combat. Because you score so high on the ASVAB test that you will just be in the war zone in a support role. And he told me that. He came and said, Sergeant, whatever his name was, said that, Mom, don't worry, because I won't have to see combat even if there is a war. And me not being from the military or a military family or really knowing what was going on, I even thought that sounded fishy. Because if it's a war zone, aren't potentially all Army, all soldiers combatants? So that was in May of 2000. Then we know George Bush comes on the scene. Then we know 9/11 happens. And when 9/11 happened, I knew somehow it would be the cause of my son's death. And he was killed April 4th, 2004, 5 days after he got to Iraq in combat. And like we talked about on Dennis's show today, Casey, we had heard all these stories about, oh, he's so brave, he volunteered, he did this, he did that, and it's even in a book that Martha Raddatz from ABC News wrote about, you know, Casey's valor and how he made another soldier get off the truck so he can go on the truck, and that always to me never sounded right from my son. Not that I didn't think he was brave, because I thought Casey had a tremendous amount of courage, but he also told everybody, I can't kill anybody. You know, there's no way I'll be able to kill an innocent person. So we just found out this year that this one of his buddies that was right next to him that day emailed us and said, why do you keep saying your son volunteered? Your son did not volunteer. And then he told me the story that during that battle, Casey was told to get on the truck to go into battle, and Casey said, no, I'm not going. I'm a mechanic. And his sergeant swore at him and dragged him on the truck, and Casey was killed just a few minutes later. So to me, and I was telling Dennis, I've been proud of Casey his whole life because he always stood up for what was right. People would try to get him to cheat on tests, and he wouldn't. He died a virgin because he wanted to save himself for his wife on their wedding night. And he just, you know, really believed. He was one of those rare Christians that really believed in the teachings of Jesus Christ. And he couldn't kill anybody. And so when I found out he was a conscientious objector to the end, that's when I was proud of him. And you know what? It shows more courage to stand up to illegal orders than to obey them and go into combat. So that's Casey's sad story, my sad story, but it all began with his recruiter and how his recruiter lied to him.